Welcome to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL, 950 AM, 100.3 FM. You can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com. And don't forget, you have a standing invitation to our 10 o'clock a.m. Mass on Sundays. So come by. You can find us at stanthonyalston.org. So we've been talking this week about what it is that we believe in, understanding that as a church, that our understanding of what it is we believe deepens over the generations. And one of the things that we can look as a model of that, and I want you to kind of understand this. Now, I've with confirmation students, I have encouraged them to watch the movie Interstellar. Now, if you don't know anything about Interstellar is a dramatization in a sense. It's a fiction story based on Einstein's theory of relativity, and the whole thing is based in time. And if you really want to kind of look at this, do understand that time is a huge factor of our faith. One of the things that we teach is that we are in time and God is outside of time. And we know that some sayings from the Bible deal with time. For me, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day, which is really kind of, obviously not necessarily related, kind of connecting a little bit to the theory of relativity. If you don't know the theory of relativity, it is essentially that time moves differently for someone as they go faster and as they travel from an object. So it's really well portrayed in the movie Interstellar. Now, why that's important is one of the main features of the movie Interstellar is a black hole. And the director tried to do everything he could to make sure everything was scientifically accurate. And there's a fascinating video on YouTube where the person, I think it was Kip Thorne is his name, the scientist, shows that the portrayal of a black hole they do in the movie is accurate. And he does this to show the whole thing. Well, I want you to understand something. Go back 100 years, no one would have had any clue what a black hole is. I kind of talked a little bit of this on Monday. Go back 150 years, no understanding. As a matter of fact, go back 100 years, and I've actually put this in an article that one of the articles I wrote. You go back even less than that. Let's go back to 1938. In 1938, people believed that we were being invaded by Martians because they believed that Mars was inhabited. Now we know that's absolutely not true. But what I'm reflecting here is our understanding of our scientific world grows over the centuries. And we've talked a lot on this program of what if all of a sudden you were transferred back to the 16th century and you would know that many of the things that they were doing were completely wrong and unhealthy and everything else. But if you tried to change that, if you tried to correct them, they'd accuse you of being a witch and they'd kill you. So you understand that every generation learns over time what it means to be who we are, and their knowledge deepens. So our scientific knowledge deepens over time. Therefore, why would you think our faith knowledge, our spiritual knowledge, does not also deepen over time? Now, one of the things people will say is God never changes. That's right. Physics doesn't change either, but our understanding of physics deepens over time, but physics doesn't change. The same physics that everyone had to deal with back 5,000 years ago, even 10,000 years ago, before we even had any concept of farming, the same physics that existed then in biology and everything else is the same physics we have now. But we have a deeper understanding of that physics in biology and astronomy and everything else that they didn't have back then. Well, the same thing applies in faith. God never changes, but our understanding of God does. If you went to talk about Christian principles, go back to King David, he probably wouldn't believe a word you would say, even though you were speaking principles that came from the same God he worshipped. Why? Because he wasn't at a point where he could understand that yet. And therefore, his understanding is different than the understanding, we'll even say, the apostles, because over time, through time, we as human beings, our understanding deepens, but that which we seek to understand doesn't change. Do we? I hope this is coming across right, because we're talking about something that's a little bit complicated there. Great thing to talk about on Christmas when everyone's supposed to be relaxing. But you understand that. So this is a powerful reality. So when people, as I said yesterday, dismiss our faith because they're basing their faith on an understanding that never grew, and we have a deeper understanding of even they do, so we, number one, don't dismiss it, and we recognize they haven't a clue what we're talking about because they've just dismissed the superficial understanding of what they think we believe, and it's not even close. You can see that that's one of the realities that we're dealing with in this world. That's it. So when someone says, I don't believe in God, we don't have to believe in God. The God they don't believe in is the one that we don't believe in either. We'll talk more on the other side of the break. You're listening to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Alston, Massachusetts. We'll be right back. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. And remember our own website, CatholicAudiomedia.com. Don't forget our parish website. I'm going to be talking more about that. STAnthony.org. That's STAnthony.org. And come visit us at the 10 o'clock a.m. Mass on Sundays, and you're welcome to check that out. STAnthony.org, where you can find us. And our podcast website is CatholicAudiomedia.com. So, You can see what I'm talking about here. So when someone is telling me they don't believe in God, chances are the God they don't believe in is a very superficial understanding of God, and we're not at that superficial level either. Let me give you an example of what is known as Martianism, having nothing to do with the planet. There was a man named Martian who believed that the Old Testament God and the New Testament God, who was Jesus, are two different gods. It's called Martianism. Well, they aren't. They are God, and we have that understanding. And Jesus is the face of the Holy Trinity. He's the face of the Father. He says the Father and I are one. So Jesus is the face of God, and by Jesus coming, he gives us a way of comprehending, of understanding God based on what we can and we cannot understand. So Jesus gives us that image of God. I don't know if the image is the right word, but that that incarnation, we'll use the right word, of God that helps us to understand who God is. That's one of the things that Jesus does. But a lot of people will read the Old Testament and they'll say that they won't understand the Old Testament, so they will say, well, this doesn't seem to match who Jesus is, so therefore these must be two different gods. They're not. But what we see in the Old Testament is something you have to understand over time. And as you understand over time, you realize that God is this powerful God who has tremendous mercy, who has tremendous grace, who is calling people to holiness, but they're resistant. And we can look back in time. We can look back 3,000 years from today to the time of David, and we can look at that and say, what would happen if the Lord did not act and everything that is the Jews went the way of the Canaanites or went the way of the Phoenicians? And so their whole culture was absorbed by the Babylonians. Well, then we wouldn't understand God today. We would have no understanding. We'd live in a pagan understanding of God, and we'd be out worshiping the God that is in the God of the Assyrians that's in the Museum of Fine Arts here in Boston. Because that truth that the Lord is teaching would be lost. So the Lord is taking action to make sure that his people are able to bring the message, and those who resist, he has to lead away from this forefront of what our truth is, so that you and I have this understanding of truth as well. So we see that. And all of that comes from realizing what we believe. We deepen our understanding over time. So we can turn around and say, oh, no, Marcionism is false. That is the same God, but we have a deeper understanding of that same God in the Old Testament within the context of Jesus in the New. We'll talk more tomorrow, and have yourself a blessed day. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation to the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.